Be careful who you listen to and don't make 30-year decisions on the last 30 minutes of news. Most investors are going to get it wrong this year. I'm not talking about those who fail to take action, because I think that's a big way that a lot of people get it wrong. Why would Perth keep going up if prices are now equal to, similar to the East Coast, and affordability is an issue? And my answer to them would be affordability is not an issue to everybody.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management, sales and buyers agency servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here's your host, Jared Mann.
Today, we've got Michael Yardney back on the show, and I love getting his broad picture view of what's happening across Australia, and especially over on the East Coast. And of course, Michael's been investing for 40 plus years, so he's often seen and done, everything before, and we can benefit from his wisdom. So thanks for joining us again today, Michael.
My pleasure, and I'm embarrassed to say it's 50.
Oh, you've crowded out another decade.
It was the early 1970s. So yes, I've seen it all. Not that I really realised what was going on the first 10, 15 years of investing. I just invested and didn't. There wasn't the news. There wasn't the internet. By the time you knew what happened, it had all gone. And that probably wasn't good. But the day-to-day news you get now is making people make decisions, Jared, 30-year decisions on the last 30 minutes of news. And that's probably not good either.
Yeah, well, speaking of the news and the media and all the experts in inverted commas are coming out with their predictions for this year, people can get very lost in it. And I thought we'd get you on to talk about the 5 property predictions that most experts are going to get wrong.
Topic, I like that, Jared, yeah.
Yeah, so take us into some of your thinking on this, and what should investors be caring about?
Well, again, as I started to say, there is lots of media attention to property, and there's going to be even more in the next months, as it's obviously an election year, and the media loves negative messages, of course, because that gets clickbait, and even I get sucked in on that in some ways. And now it's customary for people to give opinions and thoughts at the beginning of the year, as we are, and even more so now, Jared, that the interest rates have dropped for the first time in 5 years. And so let me make my first prediction, and I'm sure I'm going to be right with this one, and that's that it's going to be a bad year for those in the prediction business. And I'm sure that's correct, because most economic and property experts just get it wrong, despite being armed with all the research and all the information. The problem is that while the fundamentals, things like population growth and supply and demand and employment levels and interest rates and affordability, inflation pressures, they're easy to monitor. One overriding factor in our property markets, Jared, is that the experts can't get it right, is quantifying investor sentiment. And currently investor sentiment is low. So I guess what they're now all coming up with is, well, what's the change in interest rates going to do? How's that going to affect investor sentiment? And we're seeing a whole variety of opinions on that, Jared.
Yeah, well, Michael, you only have to look at the big banks and what they come out with every year as predictions just being horribly wrong. And, they've probably got whole research houses spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with these predictions. So if they can't get it right, who can?
Sure. So therefore, be careful who you listen to, and don't make, as I said a minute ago, 30-year decisions on the last 30 minutes of news. So at the moment, lots of people have got an idea about what's happening with interest rates. And there's no doubt that it's welcome news for homeowners, for property investors. And I think it's going to give a psychological boost that will reignite confidence in our housing markets. I know in Perth, where a lot of people have been listening to this, listening and watching this podcast, you've had a fantastic run. But at the end of 2024, there was starting to be a feeling that maybe we're running out of steam. Maybe it's running a bit long, and it's unusual for a property boom in a state to last for as many years as Perth's done, which is now four years. But I think the Reserve Bank decision is going to reignite a bit of confidence and stabilise the market, and it's going to be another good year for the Perth property market.
Well, especially when affordability has been biting a lot of different segments in the market. And that cost of living pressure is really, I think, showing up now that our prices are a lot higher for rent and for sale, and we're much more on par with the rest of the country. We can sort of feel into how Sydney and Melbourne, you know, that sentiment over there. I mean, speak to that for a minute.
Well, interestingly, it's not going to make a big difference. 0.25% interest rate on the mortgage of around $600,000 is maybe going to change things by $90 a month. So $25 a week is not going to get the average Aussie battler into the position that the family is going to be better off, or that they can buy more, or they can meet their mortgage better. It's going to take a number of interest rate cuts. And just recently, when the Reserve Bank made the first cut, it said they don't count on further interest rate cuts anytime soon. Now, is that because they genuinely believe it, or one of their ways they can help the market move the market is with rhetoric, rather than stopping people suddenly going out and borrowing a lot more, spending a lot more, which would be inflationary? They're being cautionary. So as you said a moment ago, the banks don't even know what's going on. Some banks are saying, the ANZ says 2 interest rate cuts. Others say 4 this cycle. Some say, one even suggests 5. So when interest rates keep going down and people are feeling more comfortable, I believe buyers who've been sitting on the sidelines, and in particular more affluent buyers in Melbourne and Sydney who have been sitting out of the market, are going to start getting into the market. So prices have fallen for about 10 months, 12 months in a row. Sydney's for the last 3 or 4 months, not a lot, but a little bit each month. So I think this is now going to make people feel, hey, this end of that stage of the cycle's there. I can buy a house. I'm not going to worry that interest rates are going to catch up and cause more financial stress for me. So I think it's stabilising the markets, but more so the affluent end is going to start. But that's always the way it's been, Jared. It's been the affluent part of Sydney and Melbourne that have led the new cycles each time.
Okay, interesting. So plenty of people are going to get their predictions wrong. Be careful about
the first prediction. That's right.
Yeah, that's the first prediction. So
the second prediction is many things won't happen and others will. Many of the predictions of 2025 are going to create problems for the people who made them because they went wrong. But after all those predictions, every year there's something that I call an X factor. It's in fact something I learned from Don Stammer many, many years ago when there was a weekly magazine called BRW, and he would try and predict what some call a black swan event, an unpredictable factor, sometimes locally, sometimes abroad, that affects our market, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. So what we're really looking for is something. It'd be nice to know what it is but if you knew what it is, it wouldn't be an X factor. So last year, for example, the X factor that surprised a lot of people was the huge population growth and the fact that we weren't constructing a lot of dwellings. And so the fact that close to 600,000 people came to Australia, that had a very strong positive effect. A couple of years before that, one of the factors out of the blue was this thing that came from China. Somebody ate a bat, I think, or something along those lines, and we ended up getting COVID. Global X factors occurred this year. One sort of out of the blue is Donald Trump and what his various new ideas are going to do. In 2019 in property, the big X factor was the unexpected federal election win by Scott Morrison when the Labor government lost the unlosable election, and that created a property boom. So I guess what I'm saying is, despite all the best predictions, something is going to come out of the blue, and don't know what it is. I mean, no one predicted last year that interest rates would remain as high. Remember this time last year, everyone was saying interest rates would go down. So very few believed the war in Ukraine or the Middle East would last as long as this. So again, I'm just saying, read the news, be careful, but be careful how you let it affect your thinking and your decisions, Jared.
Makes a lot of sense. I wonder what that black swan will be.
Well, when we talk this time next,
Keep an eye out for it.
we'll know. I mean, for example, who's going to win the next election and which of the various policies that they've got about property, whether it's overseas buyers not being able to buy, whether it's now forgiving HEX debt. A whole lot of things are going to come in. There'll be promises made that we're not even aware of that could affect our housing markets. Another prediction I'd like to make this year is that some forecasts will be right. I mean, I keep saying it's not going to work, but a small number of the many economic and property forecasts will, maybe even accidentally, if we're honest, come true. And those who randomly predict them, though, are going to, despite the fact it's the first time they were right in the 100 forecasts they made, they're going to say, hey, look how smart I am, look how good I am. And you and I know there's a whole wave of new buyers agents out there who, in some ways, have almost even created their own little booms. Not in the city of Perth, where Perth, to be blunt, is such a big city that a group of investors from the East Coast, while pushing up prices, it's not enough to change the Perth property market. But if you look at places like Townsville, for example, where a whole wave of young buyers agents have put a lot of their clients, and it's an area that you and I wouldn't put our clients because it's too small a location and it's got all its own climate problems, and a lot of the properties will be uninsurable. But some of those people who made predictions and then put 50 people into a suburb or a location where there's only 20 properties for sale and property values go up, and then they say, look how smart we were.
Well, you definitely have to be careful about whether something is going to stack up over the long term versus the short term.
Very good point. So when I suggest one looks for a location to invest, the question is, what is going to make the land in that location worth more in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time? And Jared, in general, it's got to do with local business confidence, creating local economic growth, creating extra people coming in, but population growth, but also jobs growth and wages growth from that. So just people coming in, if there's not economic activity sufficient to make them more affluent, there's no reason why the land should go up in value.
Makes a lot of sense. What was your fourth prediction?
Well, that most investors are going to get it wrong this year. And Jared, that's a simple one to do. I'm not talking about those who fail to take action, because I think that's a big way that a lot of people get it wrong. I'm talking about the fact that data shows that 20% of those who invest in property sell up in the first 2 years. Around 50% of investors sell up in the first 5 years. And these failed investors will never get the long-term wealth creation benefits from investing because they've made the wrong decision, they've bought for the wrong reasons, or they haven't got their finance right. Another way investors are going to get it wrong this year is being seduced by those people who tell them to buy and sell. I know a number of East Coast, let's call them advisors, have put people into the Perth property market, which I believe is going to have great long-term fundamentals. It won't grow as well this year as it did last year. It can't. It can't keep going like that. But in 10 years' time, the prices will double again. But they're saying, oh no, get out now. You've had your run and sell, and let me put you into another market, when that's not the way smart long-term strategic investors think, is it?
No. I mean, we've seen it in Brisbane. Investors got out. Many did around the same time that land tax changes were being proposed. And now they've missed out on another 20 or 30, 20 or so percent and got that wrong. And many have gotten out of Melbourne for the same sort of other reasons, with things not looking as bright in the shorter term. But those same people will probably be trying to buy back in soon.
Well, there's costs of selling, agents' commission, a few legal costs, that's not a lot, and hopefully capital gains tax. So those who bought in Perth a couple of years ago, if they bought the right properties, are going to have to pay capital gains tax, and then stamp duty getting in. And I know you and your team have spent time looking at what that would cost and how much extra you'd have to make just to break even before you even start making it a worthwhile exercise. And it's not easy to make it stack up, is it?
No, well, it's assuming that you can, achieve a very high return and do it consistently. And every time you change in and out, it's not just the return you need to chase, but also the effort of doing so. So I'd rather just set and forget my properties, let them actually start compounding and by the time you get to the 20th and 30th year, it's hard to be excited about that today, but that's where the real power comes from, Michael, when you model things out.
Very much so. And maybe the last prediction I'd like to make is those who get it right are going to do very well, which is sort of what you're saying a moment ago, because residential real estate has helped a lot of your clients and my clients over the years, despite periods when properties don't go up for a while, when properties go down a little bit. But I believe that those who take advantage of the market are going to look back in 5, 10 years' time and be pleased. I see the falling interest rates being the beginning of the next phase of this cycle, and it won't affect all areas equally. It won't affect all states equally either. But if you buy a great property at a fair price and hold on to it in the long term, there's really no reason why you shouldn't get the same wealth that other investors who've done this in the past have achieved.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head about right property and being a lot more selective at the moment. In Perth, as you said, if you go back 3 or 4 years, you could have thrown a dart at the board and done very well. And certainly in the other states when they've had their different runs. So I think need to be selective. Think about what's going to make sense over the long term. Think beyond just the next 2 to 3 years, and that's going to leave you a lot better off.
Well, people are asking, why would Perth keep going up if prices are now equal to, similar to the East Coast, and affordability is an issue? And my answer to them would be, affordability is not an issue to everybody. And over the last couple of years, the more affordable properties in Perth and in other parts of Australia have outperformed because they were more affordable. But when the prices of those properties go up and are now not that different from the more established areas, then those areas won't do as well. And I believe that gentrifying and the improving in the more affluent areas are going to go up. If you think about it, there's a lot of people with significant equity in their Perth properties. Now, we as investors tend to think about property as an investment, but remember, 70% of people buying and selling property are homeowners. So their lives are still going to get on. They're going to get married. They're going to get divorced. They're going to have children. Look, maybe not in that order. And they're going to want to keep buying. And they've got equity in their homes at the moment. So therefore, they've got the ability to do that. And a little bit of decreased interest is actually cost is going to work in their favour.
All that confidence boost to say, now might be the right time.
Definitely. And especially investors who've got multiple properties in their portfolio, if interest rates drop 1%, that increased ability to borrow could well be, for a substantial investor who's got a number of properties, enough for the deposit for another property and serviceability for another property. So I think the more affluent areas and the gentrifying areas in Perth are the place to look at over the next year or two, Jared, not the more affordable suburbs. The other thing is the bank of mum and dad has got a lot of money, and at the moment a lot of Perth mums and dads have got significant equity in their properties. And I just read recently that the average gift or loan that mum and dad are giving their kids to get in the market is $200,000. So interestingly, that's the equivalent of a deposit of a property. So I see people with equity, people with multiple streams of income, people with businesses that are going to do well once the election's over and we get on with life again. They're still going to buy properties. And so therefore, I don't think, as you said a moment ago, you can just buy any property in Perth anymore. You've got to be careful looking for affluent and particular gentrifying areas where people with affluence are moving in, pushing up values of properties.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate your philosophies, Michael. You've covered them in your books and, they're time tested. And I think everyone should seek out and check out your books if they haven't read them already.
MichaelYardneyBooks.com.au. That's a great place to start.
Excellent. That's the easiest place to find them. I'll put a link in the show notes. And thanks for your time and coming on again, Michael. Always appreciate your insights.
My pleasure. And let's find out what the X factor is this year. We can't find out until it happens.
Oh, well, it's going to be an interesting year no matter what. We've got our state election as well as the federal one. We've got always something. It'll be very interesting to see how interest rates pan out one way or another, and lots of optimism, generally speaking, about. So should be good.
It'll be a good year. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, mate.
Just a reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is general in nature. As we don't know your specific situation, you should always seek professional advice before taking any action. For free market reports on your suburbs of interest and other helpful resources to grow your wealth, make sure you join my property investor update at investorsedge.com.au/join. And finally, make sure you're a member of our Perth Property Investment Facebook group to be part of the conversation with other like-minded investors, get help to your questions, and get a feel for what's going on out there in the market. I'll see you in the group.